Guys, welcome back again. What great conversations we've been having. I mean, I tremendously enjoyed the last panel. It was also great to see an old boy of Cambridge, Dr. Ernest Addison, Governor of the Bank of Ghana, come back again to join us here in Cambridge. We're hoping to see more and more of our alumni featuring in different aspects of the program. Now we're moving on to a very exciting panel, which is about access to quality and equitable education. And we have a great lineup of guests speaking on this. I'm going to quickly move over and introduce Alex Amegah, who's a PhD student at Cambridge as well, who's going to be engaging the high-level audience in what I hope will be an enchanting conversation. So thank you for continuing to be with us. And Alex, over to you.
Thank you very much, Oliver, for the introduction. Welcome everyone to the Access to Education, Equitable Education and Quality session. We will be engaging 5 distinguished Africans who are currently contributing in diverse means to equitable access in education and education quality. They are from diverse backgrounds, as I've indicated earlier. I wouldn't take the honor from them. I would allow them to introduce themselves and also give an overview of what they are doing and how they are contributing to education on the African continent. So I would first allow Professor Moses Oketch to introduce himself and a brief overview of what he has been doing so far.
Thank you, Alice, and thank you to the organizers of this conference. I enjoyed the previous session and glad to be on this session on education. As you all know, education really does matter and is quite important in setting out all the other development aspects. But education is also quite contextual, cultural, political, and complicated. And hopefully today we'll be able to discuss some of those. As Alice has introduced me, I'm Professor Moses Oketch. I am a professor of international education policy and development at UCL, which is University College London. I've been there for about 18 years. I finished my PhD in economics of education in the United States at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I started my academic career as assistant professor at Vanderbilt University, also in Nashville in the US. Over a period of time, I've also spent time as a visiting professor at University of Pennsylvania, and I spent a period of time in Nairobi supporting research at African Population and Health Research Center as the director of research, but also helping colleagues there to work on the education research, plus many other things. Generally, I was very delighted to accept this invitation. The invitation came via Cynthia, and I have to congratulate her and her co-president, Stephen, for putting this together. In terms of my contribution to education, I mean, I've published widely, probably 100 papers. I declined so many other invitations because people want me to speak on so many things about Africa. Africa is quite diverse. My research is mainly about sub-Saharan Africa in a number of areas. But sometimes I specifically write on Kenya. I have got Kenyan heritage, but I do cover a number of countries. I've supervised a number of PhD students from Africa who have gone back to Africa and are leading work in Africa. So that does give me a great deal of pride. But I've also supervised almost 150 master's students, and some of these have been African students who have gone back to their respective countries, and they're contributing there significantly through what we used to call Commonwealth scholarship. I had a number of students from different parts of Africa who have come to UCL and at the Institute of Education. The Institute of Education is always rated #1 in the world in terms of education. So they do interact with students from all over the world, and that has been quite useful. In terms of what I can say, my own contribution to this area, most of my work in education is policy-oriented research, although I do a lot of empirical work as well, involving data collection, quantitative analysis, plus also just qualitative analysis. And I do cover work in primary education access and equity issues. I also look at technical and vocational education, but I also write about higher education. The only area that I've not covered is early childhood education, which is quite important as a foundational area. But overall, I think that when I look at the work that I've written, but also the many conferences I've been involved in, I'm currently organizing a conference here, which I'm the vice chair of. It's going to be in October at Oxford University. It's called Oketch Conference. It brings in a number of people. but I've also been a board member of the Comparative International Education Society, where a number of African students and African scholars do come to. What I see overall is that there's been tremendous improvement in terms of access, especially since 1996. We started quite well. Africa started quite well in the beginning until around 1982. When you look at the graph clearly shows you up to 1982, when structural adjustments were brought in, things really went bad. And that was due to demand management policies, cost sharing that was brought in education and health. And that took a long time to correct. It started to be corrected since 1996. If you look at gross enrollment rates today, for boys, it is over 100, and for girls, it's about 97%. So you can see it's a good trajectory. But 1970, we were already at about 55% or 54%. If we continue with that trajectory in 1970 and went that way throughout, we would have done well. So I think we lost about, the 1980s were lost decade, 1980s and part of 90s. So 2 decades were lost. Literally speaking, everything went down. In terms of equity, the wealthy actually continued. You can see that in secondary education transitions. That actually never dipped for all that period because the wealthy continued to go to secondary school. The poorest, because of opportunity cost, were the ones who actually were left behind. When you look at tertiary education, again, it did dip, actually. The 1970 were just 1.4%. Today, we are about 9%, which is still very low for a continent. Actually, I had the governor talk about skills. We are only 9% in terms of enrollment participation rate. So I think there is a great deal of opportunity in Africa. My work continues to highlight these opportunities in Africa, but I think this conference, the thing I like about it is to say Africa has to lead and have to take the opportunity. The younger people in Africa today are much more conscious about Africa than my generation and the generation before me. So that is something to be appreciated because they are proud of their continent. They believe Africa has the potential. They are doing things that older generations didn't do. So I think they're setting the stage for Africa's role in the global arena. And I think education is going to be crucial towards that. The challenge, however, remains access has been great. Quality is a big, complex issue. Equity in terms of gender is great. In fact, girls and boys are participating reasonably equally. If you look at the numbers, it's not really very bad. But the transitions into secondary school is where we are still very low. We only have about 40% participation rate in secondary education. That is very low, in terms of economic transition and prosperity in society. But the final point I want to make is that Africa always conceived education for economic development. Well, that is a big mistake. Education has got a huge amount of externalities, extrinsic values, which we've never appreciated. Until we begin to appreciate that, we will not really fix the quality and equity issue. So long as we believe in the economic transition only, without looking at the broader contribution of education to externalities and what I call intrinsic aspects of schooling, we will miss out. Let me stop there and give the chance to other panelists, but I'm here for the whole hour and be willing to engage with you on the questions that might arise. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Professor Oketch. We'll now ask Ms. Sola Abudu to also introduce herself and let us know her contribution. Please, you're muted. If you can unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Alice. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm really excited to be here. So as she stated, my name is Gbemi Abudu. I'm the founder and managing partner of BMGA. It's a EdTech finishing school for the future of work. We provide social and marketing intelligence to increase productivity in the workplace. I've actually had a very, very unconventional background to education, to be honest. I think my foray into education was out of need of what I saw on the continent. I spent majority of my formative years and professional background in the US. And when I moved back to Nigeria in 2014, I moved back working in the luxury industry. I was brought back to Nigeria by a luxury company that wanted to open a fashion subsidiary. I used to work for Louis Vuitton in the US before moving to Nigeria. And it was exciting. It was a great opportunity. But one thing I noticed very quickly after moving to Nigeria is I struggled to find the type of talent I needed for my department and within the organization I worked for. And I had conversations with several CEOs and other executives within different companies. And I realized very quickly that the issue I was having wasn't unique to the luxury industry. It was because at that point, I thought maybe it was the luxury industry because it was in its infancy stage, but I realized that it's a problem that exists across the board in all industries. And to be honest, I really didn't think much of it. At that point, I didn't think I was going to create something to try to contribute to solving that problem. But it was after I left the fashion company and I was recruited to be the vice president of sales and marketing for a private jet company, I realized that this is a huge problem because you make promises to your customers and your inability to deliver on your promise it's highly dependent on the employees you have, for them to have the right skill set to be able to deliver on that, whether it's from an emotional intelligence perspective, critical thinking, and just customer excellence. And it became apparent to me then that this is a problem that exists in Nigeria. And from more research I did, I realized very quickly that it's not unique to Nigeria. It's a problem that existed across Africa and in some developed countries as well. And what became obvious is like fundamental soft skills that are typically embedded into the curriculum is lacking. So when you talk about critical thinking, for me, even I would say the light bulb moment was when I spent the first 4.5 years when I first moved to Nigeria volunteering at an orphanage. And I would teach like early childhood development. The kids I taught were from the age of 4 to the age of 10. And it was in 2018, the founder of the orphanage and I decided that let's teach these kids good manners. And it was when I was doing the research to put the curriculum together for that I realized that what I noticed that the average Nigerian that I had engaged with from a professional context, when you talk about complex problem solving, when you talk about critical thinking, kids are generally very inquisitive and very curious. But with the way, there's a cultural element to it that at a young age, when a child says, oh, why is this? I mean, and I give an example of, I told the kids in the orphanage to always ask why? And they will go to school and they will get in trouble for asking why. And kids are naturally curious. And what you're doing is you're stifling their growth and you're stifling their curiosity. And to be honest, for me, that was when in 2019, I decided to start a company that would focus on how do we ensure that not just professionals, young professionals have the required skills to be work ready and to be successful in the 21st century, but how do you address this issue of skills mismatch that a lot of employers were complaining about in Africa? You have companies that say they have positions, but they can't fill the positions. Why? You have universities churning out university graduates on a year-to-year basis, thousands, but they can't fill them in those positions because they're not work ready, because they're smart from a technical perspective, but the core skills that employers need in the workplace, they were lacking those skills, so that work readiness. So I decided to create a company to focus on that. So we've deployed several classes at BMGA, and what we do is we make sure that every course we deploy has at least three soft skills that are heavily focused on. But what's very interesting is during the pandemic last year in 2020, we launched the BMGA Fellows Program specifically to address, we went into this to address the issue of the gender skills gap. We had this theory going in that you have young women who were sort of at a disadvantage to their male counterpart. But to be honest, by the time the program was over, we realized that it was just a skills gap, not gender skills gap. But what the program afforded us is to address issues that are specific to women that women have to deal with in the workplace. So I'll give you an example. We have different components of the program where you want people to develop their ICT literacy skills. So we have a learning platform where they have to take classes on the importance of reading. We have prescribed reading, and we analyze what they have learned in the books through the lens of what they are learning in classes. Then we have a class called Champions of Africa History. And this is very important because when you're saying you want young women to show up to be their best version in the workplace, you have to deal with some of the issues young women have to deal with, young African women have to deal with, such as colorism. You can't avoid that. That's a reality in our environment. You talk about whether it's the issue of natural hair, how is that perceived, how is that handled? Then, more importantly, you have to address the issue of, it's important that for young women, every single one of us have to pave the way for the next generation. And in order for us to feel that burden, we need to understand the women, the forgotten female African heroes who have paved the way for us. So for every right I benefit from today being a Nigerian woman, there's somebody who fought for that, right? So we talk about that. But what's been amazing about this program for us as a whole has been this issue of access to high quality education. We've been very fortunate to partner with both local universities and global universities, such as professors from Yale University, professors from Thunderbird, experts from UN Women, from different universities, and it's the whole idea of the democratization of high quality education. That it should not be because I don't come from a certain socioeconomic background that I don't have the access, and it's been an amazing thing for us to do so far. So it's focusing on employability skills, because universities all across Africa are going to continue to turn out graduates, and we have to make sure that not only are these graduates employable, but they are competitive on the global scale, where they can stand next to any of their global counterparts and they can go neck to neck with them. So that's what we do at BMGA, and I'm really excited to be here and to contribute to this wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gbemi. Would now ask Dr. Utheri Kanayo to also introduce herself, and because of time, we would please ask you to be very brief so that we'll connect what you are doing to the questions that I would have to put with you. Okay.
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Utheri. I'm a principal of Children in Freedom School. I'm also a Cambridge alumni, so I was really excited when they got in touch to ask me to be part of this conference. So I'm a Newnham College alumni, and I had a wonderful time there. Over a decade ago, I was in your shoes, Alice. I see you're also a PhD in education, so well done. I think for me, what I have to contribute is just my commitment and passion for the right education for Black children, for African children, and not to beat around the bush. I'm done with that. I'm done with trying different kinds of models without getting to the root cause. It's like being sick. Oh, I have a headache, I have a fever, and just cosmetically applying a sort of healing to yourself without really knowing, why am I sick? Going to the doctor or wherever and finding the root cause. So through my years of mentoring and working with Kenyan youth, African youth, I just found a gap of self-efficacy, lack of self-efficacy. You can do great math, you can have a good certificate, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world. I've met youth and even African adults in the UK, in Europe, in America, in Africa, who don't believe that they are as good, if not better, than any other community in the world. And I'm like, what is going on? You have good education, you've even traveled. And it hit me that we lack pride and love for ourselves as African, and to own our African heritage. And so here I was a few years ago, my husband and I, giving scholarships, wanting to take children to school, and not getting the caliber of person that we knew would change Kenya, would change Africa, would shake the world. So we started wondering, what is it? And we saw that it's all about how we feel about ourselves. So what is it that we can teach Africans so that they love themselves and they become these creators, or they feel that even me, I'm ready, even me, I'm good enough like the rest of the world, rather than being fed or led all the time. And it came down to knowing your African heritage, knowing your history, accepting it, and we started teaching it. We started researching about the greatness of Africa, okay? Not just going there to teach gender awareness, to teach entrepreneurship, to teach technology. That to me is like giving yourself medication without getting to know the root cause of the problem. And that's what I have set out my life for. And I'm just scratching the surface because the information is so much. Like, what is it that you can tell African children, teach African children? What knowledge, what information, what kind of models should we implement? So at Children in Freedom School, we've added Afrocentric activities, Afrocentric knowledges on top of the curriculum, okay? We teach them about how great their forefathers were, like the richest man who has ever lived. Mansa Musa, go and read about him if you haven't already. Move over Jeff Bezos and whoever else. The richest man who has ever lived is from Africa. We tell them about our universities, the greatness. We had universities even before Oxford and Cambridge. We were there. Actually, people came to us to ask us, how was our education? So just give children this kind of information and a bulb goes off in their head like, oh my God, I'm great. You know, I can be a contributor. I don't have to always be a recipient. So I think I'm really excited about your main theme of engaging African narrative. That's really what I'm all about. But also when we talk about access, quality, and what we are and equity, I think for me, my real contribution here is quality. Because children can go to school, but are we getting the kind of African who is going to shake the world, who is going to bring a change? Okay, so I'm looking forward to more engagement throughout the session, and I guess that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to Mohamed Idrissi. Idrissi, yes. Hello, Mohamed. I think we might have lost Mr. Mohamed Idrissi. I would call him once again to see if he's connected. Hello, Mr. Mohamed Idris. Okay, if he is not I'm sure it might be a connection issue. We'll just move on to talk about, discuss the questions that I have for our distinguished panelists today. So one of the key questions, and from what you spoke about so far, is how each one of you have identified a gap and is filling that gap. And one of the crucial questions is, most African countries have ascribed to international organizational goals like the SDG 4, and which provide aspirations and try to describe what countries should do. And my question is, are these aspirations meeting the African needs? And if in what you are currently doing, how does it connect with these goals? Should we even stick to the goals, or should we define an identity or aspiration for African countries that meet our needs in terms of educational quality and equity? So I'll give everybody at least 3 minutes to engage with the question, try and attempt to answer it, and we'll then move on to the next question. So in that same order, I'll ask Professor Oketch to give us his contribution.
Thank you, Alice. Although I did see Mohamed had come in, I could see his mic was there, but maybe he'll have a chance to speak later on.
Yes.
That's a brilliant question. It's a question we engage with all the time in academia, just the same way we engage with MDGs, whether MDGs were relevant for Africa. The same argument we are having around SDGs. I mean, the first thing is that the SDGs are not imposed on Africa. That's something some of my students always refuse. Africans actually are a part of this. These are a global UN agreed mandates, and each country normally goes through a process in which they all sign up and put their ideas, and then they're all agreed at the UN, and they become global. So they're not imposed on Africa at all. African countries have contributed to them in the way they are. Do they really meet the educational needs and aspirations of Africans? I think I would want to take from where Dr. Utheri was talking about. I mean, that's a huge topic today. Decolonization of the curriculum is a major theme all over the world, and I think you are in the right direction. I think the first thing I would say, actually, the SDGs don't tell us much about decolonization of the curriculum. So I think that's a very good response I would give you, because they didn't speak about that. That's a major theme today all over the world, especially in Africa and other parts. We know that the curriculum, the way it's been defined, much of the structure of education in Africa was actually set out during the colonial time. We gained independence. We've tried to tickle with it a little bit, but it hasn't been decolonized. And the same way, our politics hasn't been decolonized. So Africa is trying to look at colonization of knowledge, decolonization of the curriculum. It's not my area of work per se. I'm an education economist, but I really see the importance of that work in relation to equity, in relation to what Africa will be. And everything we've talked about today, actually, including what Gbemi Sola talked about in relation to skills in Africa, all these things have got something to do with how we decolonize the entire knowledge production process. But in terms of the SDGs, just to summarize the point you've said, I don't think they're bad per se. I mean, SDG 4 is very clear. It does talk about the idea of inclusive education. Actually, the way it is framed, if I can find it, is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. I think that is perfectly fine. That's an aspiration that could have been set by our four great grandmothers and great grandfathers. So is the way it is framed, I think, is absolutely spot on. I don't see it as being any contradictory to African values and what Africans would want to achieve. The challenge is always when we have metrics and how we measure them. And we've started doing that, which is problematic because we want to look at the outcomes. Because you've set a goal at the end by 2030, we also set some of the metrics, and some of these metrics are complicated. So in a short answer, I would say, in my view, and I think many other people's view, the SDGs are great, and they are useful for Africa. What they are missing is the decolonization aspect, which I think is absolutely important. The third aspect is how we contextualize the implementation itself. How do we implement these aspirations? And that requires political goodwill. The SDGs are implicit in that political goodwill. They're not explicit. You find a number of organizations such as the Global Partnership for Education, African Union, and many other forums that are trying to bring in the political aspect to it. But there is a huge amount of political goodwill in trying to achieve and implement the SDGs. It doesn't say actually how it's going to mobilize that political goodwill. It's assumed and is implicit. And I think that is where I see the weakness. But in terms of the question itself, my answer is that yes, they do really align with African aspirations. I don't think they are contradictory. They're not imposed from above. We're a part and parcel of it. The question is, how do we hold ourselves accountable as Africans towards these SDGs? We need to think about that, and we haven't come up with an African framework of accountability towards the SDGs. The decolonization is one way of that accountability, so I think that is the beginning of the path. You had 3 minutes. I hope I've finished them.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Oketch. I think that is very much from the academic theoretical perspective, and Gbemi and Dr. Kanayo would give us more practical perspective as well as Mr. Idrissi. So, Gbemi, how do you connect your work to these issues, as Professor Oketch has said, in practicalizing what the SDGs say and in terms of what you are doing currently?
So, I mean, I 100% agree with everything Professor Oketch said, because when it's all said and done, to me, when it comes to the SDGs, I see them as a guide, as a framework, where they have to be localized within the context of who we are, right? And I think that's why with us, when we talk about the Champions of Africa history, it's very important we understand our history, right? One of the things we even do with that class is it's in collaboration with UN Women, the local chapter in Nigeria, and we're talking about the issue of political participation in Nigeria, not what it is in the US or what it is anywhere else. And I think with anything, I mean, my background is business before coming to education, right? We talk about the concept of globalization. And I think globalization needs to be applied to everything, because there are learnings you can borrow from other parts of the world and say, okay, you know what, that's what they do. There's a success to that. But how does that apply within the context of our own environment, the context of our own reality? So when you talk about work readiness skills, and I know I have this conversation quite often when people say that, why are you teaching emotional intelligence to Africans? I'm like, as human beings, because with the work we do, before we started, we did some in-house research to really understand how the human brain works. So this has nothing to do whether you're African or you're American or you're English. It's how is the human brain, how does it function? How do you gather, retain, and recall information? So that was very important. From an anthropological perspective, how is human behavior? So it was important for us to have that baseline. Then you have to look at the African context of things. So even the next step of what we're doing as an organization is, even for emotional intelligence class we offer, we look at the African context of it. Because the reality is that has to be factored into everything we do. Whether it's the way, when we talk about business etiquette, the way we conduct business. And this is why it's so important, because when you look at things from a Western perspective, and maybe part of my thinking from this is my background of the business school I went to. I went to an international business school, so everything we did was from an international perspective. The way you do business in the US versus the way you do business in Nigeria is quite different. Why? In Nigeria, when we're conducting business, we start with a lot of pleasantries. How is the family doing? And it's so important to understand their nuances, right? Whereas if you go to the US, you can almost go right into business immediately. So those skills what are the skills that are relevant for the realities in our environment? The challenges we have, are we making sure that the students that are graduating from university are being equipped to know how to solve the problems that exist in Africa? And this is my issue that I keep saying that honestly, and I know this is a huge challenge, the whole idea of our educational curriculum has to change. Because, I mean, to what Professor Oketch said earlier, there's a huge element of when our curriculum was established, there's a huge English influence, a British influence to our curriculum here in Nigeria. And you don't have, well, it's not been revised to factor in the reality of what's going on there, going on here in Nigeria or what's going on in other parts of Africa. Which is why I look at what we do at BMGA, that for now, until that curriculum changes, on a state, on a national level, or in other countries, we are proposing that there needs to be another school, literally a finishing school, when you're done with university, before you go into the workplace or before you go to grad school, that prepares you for the reality of our own environment. Because being equipped to know how to solve problems in the UK or the US is one thing, but are you being equipped to understand what are the realities within Africa and what are those skills that are important? So for us, with the work we do, which is why we're focused on the practical element of things, where there's a theory element that we provide in classes, but we have things like the business case competition, where students have to look at an industry in Africa, select an industry and come up with a solution, a visible solution to solve the problem that exists within that industry based on what they're learning. So to me, it's going back to your question, I always say the combination of both, because for us, we have professors who are trained, who are Western professors, but we also have local professors who have the African knowledge. I think both are very important.
I think what I'm getting so far is how to contextualize some of these global guides and to be able to make it relevant to the African context. And I think it is important to highlight the fact that you are doing a work that try to bring in how relevant it is for young people to know these contextual issues and to accept that there's a need to think along those lines and work within that framework. So Mohamed is here. I would ask him, Mohamed, I'll take in and introduce Mohamed. So Mohamed works, is the CEO of Teach for Morocco. He works with local schools to provide edtech opportunity for young people. And so, Mohamed, I would ask you to sort of link what you are doing to the question so far. And it's building around contextualizing education, decolonizing education, and we'd like to know how it ties in with the STG in the delivery of the services within Morocco.
Thank you, Alice. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Great. So thank you, Alex. Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm really excited about this event. It's really a very important event about engaging the African narrative and about education and equality. I would like first to introduce myself. My name is Mohamed Idrissi. I am the CEO and co-founder of Teach for Morocco. So Teach for Morocco is a part of the global network Teach for All. Teach for All is a network of 60 independent, locally governed partners, organizations, and a global organization that works to accelerate the network progress. We are 12 network partners in Africa. We are based in Gambia, Senegal, Liberia, Ghana, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Uganda, Sierra Leone, Kenya, Zimbabwe.
Hello, Mohamed. Can you hear us?
Teach for All is, as I said, it's a global network.
Yeah, your audio is a little bit faint. If you can talk a little bit louder for us.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, you can. Yes.
As I said, Teach for All is a global network to tackle the complex challenges facing the children in disadvantaged communities. We need a coalition of leaders addressing the problem in all of its complexity. Each network partner recruits and develops promising future leaders. to teach in their country under resourced schools and communities, and these foundations to work with others inside and outside the education or the classrooms to ensure all children are able to fulfill their potential. Teach from Morocco, our mission in Teach from Morocco is the provision of quality.
Hello, Mohamed. Can you please turn off your video for us to see if we can get a stable connection from your end? Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so our mission is to improve educational outcomes for all children in Morocco by recruiting and training exceptional individuals to teach in underserved schools for a minimum of 2 years. Before launching this program here in Morocco in 2018, I've been serving my community as a mayor. I would like to get back to my story. When I was 4 years old, I was living in the rural areas in Morocco, in the mountains, where I didn't have the accessibility to go to school. So it was really, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the quality of education and the availability of the teachers, was one of the major problems and the challenges that we are facing in the rural areas. So about equity, inequity, and the quality of education. But I think my parents took a good decision when they sent me to my grandparents in the urban center, where I have like the minimum standards of education. And I was able to be the only person from my family to get a good quality of education and to continue to pursue my education in US to get my MBA degree. And after that, I had a chance to work in different.
Thank you very much, Mohamed. Dr. Kanayo, can you please unmute yourself and also contribute to the conversation? I think Mr. Mohamed's internet is poor, so yeah. Okay.
Okay, he's still talking.
Okay.
I didn't want to talk over him.
Yes.
Is it okay?
Yes, that's fine.
It's okay?
Yes, please.
All right. Okay. So I think we are in a global world, and life right now is about partnership, regardless of where you come from. Okay. So I look at the SDGs and they're ideal, they're well-meaning. Okay. I think where the problem comes in for Kenya, Africa, and other African countries is there are these wonderful guidelines that have been set out. And then now, how do we translate this to our own context? Who helps us break it down? And you'll find that those people who are helping us break down, the people sitting around the table now implementing or maybe first discussing how Africa is going to do it, or whichever country in Africa is going to do it, are not necessarily indigenous. They're not from here. So the SDGs have been designed globally with all the voices of the people, different countries, maybe in Europe or wherever, Asia, they go and have teams, local teams. When it comes to Kenya and the like, then we don't really have a local team designing what are we going to do next, regardless of people like myself, Bemisola being available. And then we're kind of relegated to doing it our own way, rather than being the voice or part of the voice that would do it in a national way. So I want to take us back, because I have some understanding of how Africa was before Christ. I'd like to encourage you to go and look for a book by Robin Walker, who is a Black British historian. He wrote the book When We Ruled, okay? And I'll read for you an excerpt from his book. when he talked about Benin City, how great it was. And even if you Google, you'll find that Kano State, and maybe it's still there, had a wall greater than China. Okay, these cities were so developed, and the Ubuntu in Africa was so great that, to be honest, what's on the SGD right now is what we used to practice. It's nothing new. And I always think the more things change, the more they remain the same if you know the truth. There's nothing in this SDG, no poverty, zero hunger, quality education, clean water, all the like up to number 17 that would not have been implemented already by Africans. It's nothing new, but it takes the circle, a big circle. I remember the previous session on economy and finance and how they were saying our natural resources go abroad before they come back to us. It's the same information is happening. It's looking like it's now coming from an international forum, different-minded people. Let me tell you, Africa used to practice SDG once upon a time. Let me read you this excerpt from a Dutch European traveler. He was Dutch, and he was describing Edo State. The city seems to be very big. When you walk into it, you go to large, wide, and open street, which appears to be 7 or 8 times the width of Wamos Street in Amsterdam. Wamos. The King's Palace is a group of buildings that occupy as much space as the city of Harlem, and which is walled. There are numerous apartments for the ministers, princes, and beautiful galleries, most of which are as large as those of the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. They are supported by wooden pillars wrapped with copper, where their victories are depicted and which are carefully kept very clean. The city is made up of 30 main streets, very straight and 120 feet wide, apart from an endless number of small intersecting streets. The houses are close to each other, arranged in good order. These people are in no way inferior to the Dutch when it comes to cleanliness. They wash and scrub their homes so well that they are polished and shiny like a mirror. So there's a book, Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. My point is this. SDGs are great. SDGs were practiced by Africans once upon a time. When they come back to us, we need, that's why I keep saying we need to know our histories. We need to just embrace them and know once upon a time, this was it for us. And it's nothing new. Africans did it. Africans can do it again. Let's get to work. That's it from me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kanayo. I see the link between African capabilities, African identities, and ownership of some of these goals, globalized goals like the education goals and the SDG 4. I think most of what you do ties into my second question, was to see what are the innovative ways that you as distinguished Africans within their scope of education are contributing to equitable access. What are the things countries can scale up to ensure that every single African child has access to quality and equitable education? If Mohamed is here, I would like to start with him and get his contribution on that. Hello, yes, we can. Thank you very much. Professor Oketch, I know you, through your research, you have engaged with a lot of African countries, and I would like to know, through your experiences, what are some of the innovations you've come across in terms of quality and equitable access to education?
Great question. I think the innovation is already here in the name of what Dr. Utheri Kanayo is doing. I would say that is one innovation to help deal with pedagogic issues that have existed for a long time. The way the pedagogy is structured and the curriculum itself are major issues. Teachers teach the way they're taught. They have always been taught in a very formalized way, and they go and do the same to the kids, and they pass knowledge that way. And that has been problematic. I think one of the innovations that is currently there, and this is cutting across a number of countries, is to move away from a very structured exam-oriented model of education to a competency-based way of education. What is missing in that competency-based actually is this decolonization aspect. I think that competency-based has to really recognize that knowledge is not only Western knowledge. I mean, kids come with a lot of knowledge from their homes, from their communities. Until we embed that and respect that as part of the curriculum, it's going to be complex. I can give you an example of a research I did in Nairobi. This is actually in the slums, and it's a word that I don't like to use, but the parents there believed actually sending their children to a school where they can actually talk English meant that that education was of good quality. So if a kid comes back home and they can say, a few things in English, I mean, the parent was much confident that that kid was getting quality education. But it just tells you how quality is defined. It's quite defined in a very normative Western way. But that is also the way the structure of the country is. I mean, they see the ministers talk in English. They see success associated with English. You can't blame these parents. Anybody who is successful, the children of people whom they consider successful are all these people who have gone to very high-end, elite English-speaking schools. So the problem begins with our leadership, us. I mean, what do our leaders tell us in the way that they embrace education? I mean, you don't expect one education for the children of everybody and another education for the children of the leaders. They have to go in sync. So it's a huge problem for Africa. The issue around confidence in who we are as a continent and how the education system should reflect that. But in relation to the question of equity, quality, and access, these are major issues. I mean, there's always trade-off at some point in the two of the or three of these. I would say that the MDGs was a great success story for access. We can't blame that. In fact, by 1980s, Africa was doing quite well, and almost over 80% were actually going to school. But that dipped seriously after 1982 for about 2 decades and went back almost 60% or 70%, I would say, something like that. So access has been a great story since the MDGs, and I think we have to celebrate that. A lot of kids are in school. People normally say going to school is not the same as learning. I mean, girls that are safe in school. I mean, the numbers have just shown us during this pandemic how many young girls have become pregnant, unfortunately, because they're not in school. So going to school, while people measure quality in terms of just being able to read and be numerate, there are many functions of schooling in society, and just going to school, spending 6 years in school is quite developmental for young people. So access is not a bad story. The fact that we've made this great stride in access should be celebrated. But when it comes to equity, I say gender equity has been great. In terms of socioeconomic background, that has not been. In fact, we still see a huge disadvantage, which is associated with people's socioeconomic disadvantage. But we also see first-generation learners, kids whose parents actually are not literate, and that itself is a major disadvantage. So we see all these as equity-related issues. In terms of quality is going to be a major issue. We define it a bit narrowly at the moment because we define it in terms of foundational skills, literacy and numeracy. But we don't also define it in relation to confidence, the ability of self-identity and all these things. But scientifically, I think these things also come together. You're not going to have that confidence if you doubt your foundational skills, if you doubt your ability to be able to read, if you doubt your numeric ability, you're not going to have that confidence on its own. So I think there is a way in which these things are brought together. And I think that the major discussion today is to move away from an exam-oriented education system, a system that actually really looks at the learners and pedagogic skills within different classrooms, and also to consider the teachers themselves. I mean, the issue around quality has to do with what is leading to the failure. And you can talk about failure in relation to what we call school systems that are failing. You can call that immediate causes of the failure. Schools where the head teacher doesn't come in, they don't care about the curriculum, they don't hold accountability. But I don't want to be in a deficit model here. But that's just a basic. You just need to make sure, like in any household, you must make sure that the school is functioning to the bare minimum. And where those are not the case, those have to be corrected through all possible means, including inspections and the rest of it. Then we've got like what I would say, I mean, deeper courses. These deeper courses are system failure courses. If teachers are not paid on time, I mean, if you don't pay teachers' salary on time, I mean, you don't expect them to go to school. There are some governments who pay teachers, way, past the due time for them to be paid. These people have got needs, they have to be paid for the work they do. And if teachers fail to show up and they don't take their job seriously because you have not paid them, those are a system failure issue. And I think those system failure issues are going to affect quality. So unless we address the immediate causes, which are school-related effectiveness issues, and then system issues, we are still going to be confronted with the issue of quality. Access itself has worked. A lot of parents have bought to the idea of opportunity cost of schooling has reduced quite a bit, especially as Africa is getting more urbanized. So you used to find a lot of people sending their children to the farms in the morning. So they say, why go to school in the morning? Look after cows, look after goats, go to the market. But as we increasingly urbanize in Africa, the opportunity cost of schooling, especially for primary schooling, is getting diminished. And with that opportunity cost getting diminished, more of access is happening. Now, we need to then deal with the systemic issues that are actually blocking quality to happen. It's a trade-off in the immediate term. When there is a surge in enrollment, we expect that quality to decline. But what we are missing, as you said, are these innovative approaches towards that. One of the ones that I can say is important is the ones that are looking at competency-based and moving away from exam-oriented measurement of quality. I stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. We would take a few questions from our attendees, and one of the questions that and I'll pose this to either Dr. Kanayo or Gbemi Bisola. So it says, what is the way forward? Should the continent of Africa adopt, for instance, a continent-wide language, and what should we promote to ensure such equitable access to education?
I can start with that. No, I don't think we should adopt a continent-wide language. I think one of the advantages we have is the fact that we're a very diverse continent. I think that's something to be celebrated. We should not become a homogeneous continent. I think the issue ends up being that we take pride, and so what everyone has echoed, I'm going to echo what everyone has said, is taking pride in who we are. It's whatever scientific breakthrough, what is it being published? Yes, you have the national language everybody speaks, which is English, but we should also learn to publish things in our own local dialect. I think it's very important because the whole idea of, I take pride in the fact that although I grew up in the US, I'm very fluent in Yoruba, and I hope my kids become that as well. It's something that we should take pride in, and we should not diminish our culture. And when you say access, I think there's a lot of, I feel like telcos and governments have a huge role to play in access to equitable education. It's very, very important, because when it's all said and done, we can't ignore the role technology is going to play. And if Africa cannot come on board, if we don't increase the technology, the internet penetration, not just for the kids of the elites, but to make sure that nobody's left behind, there's going to be a wide gap and there's going to be a huge divide. And I would say that there's so many companies out there and several edtechs that are coming up that are addressing this issue, that how do you ensure that if you have the kids in the village who don't have access to smartphone, but their parents have your basic analog phone, how can you ensure that they can get access to good information, to technology through that? There are a lot of companies that are doing that now. And I would say there's some telco that are also trying to address that issue. And what I mean by that is the cost of data is extremely high. One of the things I know we're focusing on is to make sure that we can partner with several of these internet providers, that whenever anyone is taking a class on our platform, the cost of data is low, or it's affordable, or that it's offered at a discounted price. It's so important that everyone understands the role they play in this, because it's not just left to the private sector, left to the universities, or left to the government. Everyone literally has to actively play a role to ensure that this is not just a one-person problem. If we don't make sure, we keep talking about the next information technology, we keep talking about the future of work. The reality is we need to be ready for the current work and for the future of work. And if we're not, there's going to be a huge divide that Africa will be left behind as a whole. So for me, I think the message that BMG, and I want every one of us here, is to ask ourselves is, what role can I play? What, within the sphere of my influence, who do I know and who can I talk to? Who can I assist to ensure that we're all working together to make sure that we're moving the continent forward? Because if not, in the long run, the continent will be left behind.
Thank you, Gbemi. Dr. Kanayo, your submission.
Yeah, I'm really excited with the questions that are coming through. I'm just reading them because it's just showing me that the participants have a high level of awareness that there's some gap in Africa when it comes to our curriculum. It's very Eurocentric, okay? When it comes to language, and I've read about and listened a lot to Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who is a language guru, local language guru. And he talks about, if you know all the languages of the world and don't know yours, you're a slave. But if you know your language and then add on others, you're empowered. And indeed, it's true, because language is a carrier of culture, is a carrier of values, okay? Just think of a phrase, any phrase in your mother tongue, even English. Some people here, English is their mother tongue. Then try to translate it to a different language. And then you start getting a bit confused. There are gaps. What's the right word? That just shows you that you are losing meaning as you start translating. Okay. So Africa, because we are speaking a foreign language. I mean, I'm speaking in English. I'm not talking to you in Swahili or my Kikuyu. I'm speaking in English. There's levels of knowledges, cultural heritage that I've lost just by owning this foreign language, owning a lot of foreign knowledges over my own. I don't know how. I like that idea from Thank God Ebenezer about, do we get to a continent-wide language? And I think there was once, correct me if I'm wrong, in the 70s or something, we were trying, or the presidents were trying to push Swahili, I think. If not for the whole of Africa, for Central and Eastern Africa, we were all to know Swahili just to improve on trade, to improve on just cohesion among the people, okay? I don't think it's a bad idea. It's going to take a lot of hard work. It might not be 100% necessary. So I'm getting what Gbemi is saying. Might not be 100% necessary, but it's something, as we stabilize, can be pushed forward. But still, schools, everything is education. Schools should teach mother tongue, okay? Why are we learning English full-time, okay? Swahili partly. Kikuyu nowhere, Luo, Luya, what? These are our local languages. When it comes to Nigeria, actually my husband is from Nigeria. I don't know if you do Igbo, Yoruba in school. So you see, and Professor Ngugi talks well about this, that it's like we've been taught when you become Eurocentric, or you have to embrace Eurocentrism at the cost of your own culture. Okay, for you to be a good English speaker, for you to be a citizen of the world, take on what's brought by others, okay? The foreigners, okay? The richer countries, the colonizers. Relegate yours, which is the wrong way. Why would they not be at par? That as I'm knowing my Yoruba, as I'm knowing my Shona, as I'm speaking my Kikuyu, I can also speak English. I can also learn other people's culture, but at the same level, embrace my own culture. So there is a colonization of the mind, which is still ongoing. And even people in this forum, educated to PhD level, okay, like myself, where we now embrace, we embrace foreign ideologies more than we embrace our own, because that's how we have been brought up. That's how we have found ourselves. So I believe one of the ways to boost our language, put it in the curriculum, let it be taught alongside other languages. It's ridiculous that you're learning French and English and relegating your own language, which is full of your cultures and deeper meanings, okay? And get it examined. If that's what's going to take to make it serious, get it examined, get it. So those are some of the innovations that we're doing at Children in Freedom School. Alongside Mandarin, French, English, Swahili, a child is learning their mother tongue. If you're Kikuyu, do Kikuyu. But then alongside that, you do a local language, which is not of your own. Just the way we tell them, just the way you're doing French and Mandarin and it's not your own, you're going to do another Kenyan language that's not your own. We're going to end tribalism. We're going to promote cohesion and love for one another. We're going to start embracing our language. It's totally ridiculous that at 40 years, 60 years, you're only speaking your mother tongue and you come from a country of 40 plus languages. So those languages don't matter, but you can speak Spanish, French, German. It's ridiculous. It just says how colonized we are.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kanayo. Thank you to our panelists and all our attendees. We would end here, and I would like to give a summary of what we have discussed so far and some of the four main themes that have deduced from our discussions. One is what Mohamed is doing with Teach for Morocco in terms of using EdTech to bridge gaps in local communities. What Dr. Kanayo is doing with embedding Afrocentric values in curriculum in her school, and what Gbemi is doing in identifying skills gaps and building specific educational systems and education values to sort of supplement or complement what the Nigerian education system is providing currently, and what Professor Oketch is doing in using research to engage with African successes and pivoting our strives of change through educational research outcomes. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed the session and engaged, and I hope the discussion won't end here, and wherever we find ourselves, we should keep pushing the innovations and make sure that we are not just identifying the problems, but making sure that each one of us is taking ownership of our African aspirations and values, decolonizing education, and ensuring that each African child gets access to quality and equitable education. Thank you very much, and do enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Alice, for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.